what I think water is teaching us basically is that the whole of reality um, isn't solid. We think of water as a particular state, but I think it's reminding us that we could look at everything as being as fluid as water.
Good morning, my dear friend, David Manning. Hi.
Candace, it's been such a long time since we've got together and talked, and I was really delighted when you sent me this invitation for today. Yeah, it's lovely. It's lovely. Lovely to
Yeah.
see.
You know what I love, love, love is that I'm sporting a farmer's tan here from my tractor and horse time. And look at you. You've gotten kissed by the sun too.
I've just we our summer has been a long time coming, and it's only just kicked in, literally in the past few days. But I live, on the coast, and I've just been for a long swim now. The tide is high, and the water is starting to warm up, and of course the jellyfish are coming immediately, uh, which is a real disappointment. But but yeah, we've had a few days of nice weather, so you can see my nose is a bit pink, I think. Uh,
I think it looks fantastic. I think that one of the biggest crimes of the last century is this incredible idea that it's been foisted upon humanity about staying out of the sun.
yeah,
And I understand there's things like melanoma and skin things. I get it. Dad had one taken off his nose or at the top of his head at some point many years ago. I understand the danger in that, but the overall benefit from being in the sun, not, the vitamin D and all the other things, simply just being away from
it's
these boxes.
extraordinary, I think. Just and the sun has always been a really important part of my life, but in the past few years, it's really come in, and so I have this what I would term a personal relationship with the sun, and I know that's possible for all of us. That's how it's meant to be. Um, and it's a simple thing to organize. You just connect heart to heart with the sun and listen, and you recognize that all of the rays of light that you are receiving are filled with personal information that your field will decode for you. It's it's extraordinary. And those times like the solstice we've just been through, which already seems like it was years ago, even though it was a huge thing in its own right, it feels like, oh my God, yeah, we had the solstice. Normally that would be a whole 2 week of integration, and now it's just gone. It's because there's so much going on. But it was a beautiful, beautiful um, influx of light and codes and guidance for the next few months. And I think that's what those solstice and equinox points really represent is like a reset moment where the sun just sends out a stream of information for the next 3 months until the next point, which will be the autumn equinox or the September equinox. And I think it's a really useful time to just orient ourselves and receive that stream of light, that information. I think our ancestors used to do it, and we're coming back to that. And yeah, I think it's a really important reset that the whole planet gets. Um, and that's why so many, oops, I'm sorry. That's why so many of those, uh, what you call the monuments and Stonehenge, but they were all arranged. Sorry, my phone is not within reach, but I would switch it off if it's
Can't hear it. Can't hear it. It's
okay.
fine.
That's great. That's great. Yeah, so all of those monuments and stuff were arranged for the solstices and equinoxes to catch and amplify those energies, and we are too, in effect. Our system orients itself because we're part of the living field of this solar system, and it's amazing. It's beautiful.
You've
So
already given me some, I've already written down five things that you've said that I want to talk about already. We've been talking 3 minutes. So the first thing, jellyfish. I have a jellyfish thing I want to talk to you about, but all of these five things tie in together. I actually say this to my community and sometimes in my own sort of talking on social media or in videos with other people or even alone. You have been such a wonderful, well, friend, but also a very inspiring influence for me and my energy work over the years. And I talk to my clients all the time about your stuff. But one of the things you did with me once, which was just like an aha moment, and it was so amazing, was you and I were getting together for something, and you asked me how I was. And the first thing I said was, I'm great. I had this really interesting dream last night, and I started to tell you about it. And the dream was, I don't even fully remember the entire dream, but I remember beginning to describe it. And I remember saying that I only had a piece of it. And I said, and you said, well, what do you remember? And I said, well, I was on the beach and the sun was shining, but when the rays were coming down, they weren't regular light rays. They were little bits of, it almost looked like disco ball mirror, little bits of things coming down like that. And you did this thing, David, and it was magical. You did this thing. You said, let's go into your dream right now. And I was sort of like, my first thought was, well, wait a second, we're sitting here talking, and how can I do? And you just put that idea, you just like with a platter, put it right into my head. Do you know what, David, how many times I've done that now with my own clients? Let's go into your dream right now. And it's the same reaction. They're like, well, wait a second, I'm not sleeping. It's like, I have to think about this. How do you do that? I have to be tonight when I go to bed. I'm like, no, let's just go in there right now.
Yeah.
And how magical that has been, even for people who've been searching and doing this kind of stuff for a while. Just that little permission slip has been so fantastic in my life, and in by extension the lives of my clients and
Yeah,
people who
that's amazing, isn't it? And it is such
yes.
a simple thing. I don't know who told me that, but I think somebody did guide me into that process of, well, just choose a really amazing or a bright image from your dream and connect with it and just go back there. And then you can start to communicate
Right.
with all of the different aspects of the dream because it's all you. And it's the same if you have a vision, and all of these things are operating in the same dimension, and you can just go back in at any point and connect because they're living fields of energy, all of these things, and are full of information, and they actually want us to we have, I think it's useful to get over the idea that the mystery means these things want to keep us locked out of the secrets, and they don't. They want us, they're dropping us clues and saying, here, come this way, listen. So they want us to understand. They want us to decode what is on offer. And it's not difficult. It just takes a little bit of willingness and imagination, and sometimes you have to use your will to push a bit into
Yes.
those places in your psyche or in your body. Sometimes where if something is feeling locked or tight or painful, you can push your way in there a bit and um, not barge your way in, but just gently, sort of insistently push, and things will just open up, because we are meant to decode all of this information. It's not
Mhm.
it's not hidden from us. It just is a little veiled, and we have to be willing to make the effort. And that dream stuff, I think, is marvelous. And I'm always intrigued because you dream so powerfully, and I'm not a dreamer in that sense. Most of my nights I'm aware I've dreamt, but I don't retain the dreams. Um, Occasionally I have a dream that is, bright and vivid, and usually just before I wake up, and I know that's information for me. But usually they're gone, and I think maybe because I'm fairly good at accessing a lot of information in the waking state that I don't. But I always think I'm missing a trick here, that I should pay more attention. And I do that thing. I go to bed with a notebook intending to to take notes, but
It's hard, isn't it? It's
yeah, I
hard.
don't
You
really.
know,
But your dreams, you're a dream specialist. So
well, I go through phases myself, really. I go through phases where they're all right there. And then I go through phases where it's like, wow, they're kind of gone right now. You know, it's kind of like the weather, I think, sometimes. A
and are
lot of,
you still dreaming of water?
oh my gosh, yes. And that's one of the things I'm writing down too. Yes, ever since, and I believe, you know, at first I didn't, but I think I picked a day and it was the 25th of April. And every single day since then, I've been dreaming about water. And then one of the things, because that was the run up to our, excuse me, our live immersion event, which of course, you know, that's so much about water too, you know, the immersing of it. And we were right next to a lake, and a lot of it had to do with information and connecting with the expanded realms where parts of us are, of course. Um, and one of the things, we had a tandem session and Dolores came through, and Dolores Cannon, and it was fascinating because right outside the sliding glass door where we were was a view of the lake. And you know what she talked about? She was talking about how to amplify really anything, but amplify communication, understanding or healing or energies, you know, just the amplification. And so she was talking about in the general sense, like the amplification of this kind of stuff that's happening on the planet right now. But then she was, as practical as she always is, she was bringing forth this idea of how do you access that, you know, and how can you all access that? And she basically said, look out the window. Do you see the sun? Do you see the sun on the water? And it was all about that shimmer, that sparkle. And look how that's like the dream. And, you know, you're by the sea and I'm, you know, all the water is just so, so important about that. But, you know, the idea of even remembering there's nothing more brilliant. And particularly, you know, I spent many, many summers in the Texas Gulf Coast with mostly my dad and my brother and my husband, decades until that chapter kind of came to a close. But that there's no more brilliant light on the planet than the light that glints off of the ocean like that.
Yeah.
And there's something so concentrated about that, and just your memory of it, your memory of it. And then that brings me to jellyfish after you, if there's anything you want to say about that, because
Well,
the jellyfish is huge. I have something to say about that.
oh, well, good. Maybe because that light on the water, I mean, I spent a lot of time looking at that light on the water in different at different times of day. And, you know, moonlight is you know, when there's a full moon and a high tide, and I'm just sitting on the beach. It's like liquid fire, the light playing on the water, and it's just utterly mesmerizing. It really is.
Yeah.
Um, there's something so perfect about it. And normally it's windy here because I'm on the coast, and we've got this little period of a few days where there isn't much wind, and that doesn't happen often. So the sea gets very, very calm, and that changes everything because it has this mirror-like quality. And I mean, it's just breathtaking, but really, you do get a double whammy because you get the light of the sun, and then it's reflected off the water and all of the sand and the stones and everything. You get this really concentrated field of light and energy that is extraordinarily vibrant. You know, it's really, really vibrant. And um yeah, I'm constantly amazed and delighted to be living by the sea. And I think there was that study done about longevity and happiness, and the two places that were found to be most beneficial for your state of mind and state of health were either living by the sea or living in the mountains. And I'm definitely, I was born, you know, close to the coast, and the sea called me back this time. And sometimes I'm sitting here. My home. I have an apartment which is up a hill from the beach, but we're not even 100 yards back from the coast. And sometimes meditating in the evening, the energy of the sea just washes into the space and bathes me, and it's extraordinary. And I'm connected. I'm working with an amazing woman who lives quite locally called Jo Hemant,
Yes.
and we connected probably 6 months ago or towards the end of last year. And I had no idea she lived just up the road, really 30 miles away. And then we met in person the day before the equinox and chatted and realized that we hang out much more. And we've just been on an amazing journey up to Scotland, which involved a lot of water again. But that's her speciality in a sense. That's her focus, is the waters. And she's over at a sacred spring a couple of miles from here right now. And so it's become a much bigger part of my life, in a sense, water and the awareness of water. Uh,
Mhm.
and I think it's becoming more important for everybody. I think there's more scientific information emerging about the nature of water. And our community has been aware for a long time that it holds memory, it holds huge amounts of information. Um, but I think now science is catching up with the esoteric properties of water, in a sense,
Yeah, they're
that is
catching up
life
with
itself.
us. Is
Yeah,
the way,
yeah.
the way I like to think about that. One of those longevity studies I think you mentioned, I had some of the people with the healthy long lives in Okinawa, in that Japanese island of Okinawa, and which I find just extraordinary in a lot of ways. So I lived there as a child, and
Mm.
this is where this jellyfish thing happened. So I've been reaching into some of my with some writing that I'm doing and have been doing on and off for many years actually, but this idea of consciousness and what I'm remembering as a child, and what's a dream and what's a memory. Is that really my memory, or is it the memory that I was told this story that happened to me? And I've been tearing apart some of those, especially some of the bigger moments, examining, looking into them a little more deeply. And one of the things I was talking about was that I thought I'd had my first real memorable out of body experience when I was 11, but really meditating on it and understanding it and delving into it, what I realized is that no, uh, I always kind of thought that was it. It was very powerful and memorable. I had a fever, and but it made me think of another memory to study and contemplate. And this was, I was sitting on a beach in Okinawa with my father, and I was very, very small. Nobody remembers how small I was, but I was somewhere around 2, almost certainly less than 2. So I'm just on the beach as just a very small little toddler with my dad near the water, and the white sand of Okinawa is supposed to be really beautiful, especially some of the more lovely beaches. And it was just a lovely day to be out there, I suppose. And then the waves were washing up to our feet. And as the ocean sometimes does, it brings up a wave that's a little bigger than the previous few that have washed ashore. And so one of those came up, and it went up all over us, not in a dangerous way for breathing or anything, but this wave brought a Portuguese man of war
Wow.
with it. And it was a huge one with really, and as I'm saying this, I'm getting a huge tone in my ear. I had this thing deposited itself on me, and it landed here, and the tentacles went across my back. It went down across my heart, over my abdomen, down around my legs. And if you know jellyfish, and I know you know jellyfish, just the tiniest little bit of a jellyfish on you is outrageously painful, burning and stinging. And I had a majority of my skin as I was a baby, wrapped up in Portuguese man of war. And when the story was referred to by my family, I always thought that, it was my dad's story because I kind of saw it from outside, right? And so I thought, this is my dad's memory that I'm bringing up.
Yeah.
No, I left my body
Mm.
to survive. It was so traumatic. I shot out of my body and I watched the whole thing, and I watched him carry me and run with me to like a little first aid station where this little Japanese man ran and got seawater and was isn't that interesting too? Ran and got a bucket. You don't use fresh water, you use
Yeah.
seawater to, but what I'm understanding now so much is that combination of that electric searing pain with the sun, with the water across my heart. Um, it was like this electrical, energetic initiation into being human that has followed me my whole life. David, I had scars, even I remember as a child, from my shoulder down to my hip. It was like this big patch on my body that didn't tan like the rest of it. And it just kind of shrunk. And even I remember, even when I got married, I had maybe like a potato sized bit of it right here. I remember thinking that it's lasted that long. It's actually finally gone now that I'm in my 60s. But so much of this, I realize now that I'm able to reach back and think about the water and sun and energetic connection of that. And something about those jellyfish, I think, can offer uh, less traumatic versions, let's say, of amplification.
Well, yeah, because when you were talking about that, I understood that it was completely an initiatory process for you, and one that helped, in a sense, to keep those doorways open to stop them closing down. And sometimes we need or the way things are arranged on this planet, we have traumatic experiences that work in that way, because we're not whatever. We haven't worked out how to do it in other ways yet, but we will get back to that where children are trained to keep that, those doorways open without needing to be shocked out of their body. But for a lot of us, that's how it happens, isn't it? So, yeah, and I mean, some of these jellyfish are extraordinarily beautiful. I don't even think a Portuguese man of war is actually classified as a jellyfish. It's something else. But they're they're certainly otherworldly inhabitants of this planet, aren't they? They come in from other dimensions, the same as octopus are,
Sure.
another. Well, I mean, in effect, we all are, but those are very much that. And yeah, it's an interesting thing, and they're extraordinarily beautiful. The patterns in their bodies, when you look at them, it's like, oh my God, and they're just floating. And the trouble here is that there are a lot more of them now than there used to, because the waters are getting warmer, and so they're showing up earlier. And it does make you think about, it puts you on edge when you're swimming, um because you just don't want to be stung. And that's that. And the ones here aren't, there are two primary types. One is a creamy white one, the others are purple ones. I think the purple one is a more intense sting than the white one. But what is easy to notice is that your personal response and the level of cortisol you have in your system really amplifies the pain. So if you can remain calm when you have a sting without, or, when you see a jellyfish in the water, it's like, our chemical basis, the chemicals in our system magnify the experience or not. in whatever way we want to do that. And it's a really clear, it's the same with allergic reactions. And I guess a sting is like an allergic reaction, isn't it? The more anxiety and cortisol and adrenaline that's present, the bigger the response is going to be. And so it's an interesting learning watching that, because the people that seem to be, in a bit, end up with the biggest swellings and the biggest painful response to what is going on. So I think that's just a really clear learning, in a sense, that you get to see that very it's very much in your face. So
Well, I'd love to know more about some of your consciousness forays with water, some of those discoveries. So what might be unique about that? Of course, Veda Austin's work is very much on my radar as well.
what I think water is teaching us basically is that the whole of reality isn't solid. We think of water as a particular state, but I think it's reminding us that we could look at everything as being as fluid as water, as holding memory, because all of the energy that we project into a piece of furniture or a piece of clothing or a home that we live in stays and is readable and experienceable, by anybody that enters into the right state, with those objects or whatever. And it's like physical reality isn't nearly as physical as we think it is. And I think that's so we're starting with water, really recognizing that actually it's consciousness itself. And soon, collectively, we'll be recognizing, oh, everything is consciousness itself and can be interacted with and permeated. And no doubt we'll be moving back into those states, collectively now on a large scale, where we can shift patterns and things that are apparently solid, will we be able to move them and alter them much more easily through our focused attention. And I think that's what water is really pushing us towards, is that it's the first step that we become aware of that. And we are full of water. We are, I don't know what the statistic is, 80% water or something like that. So we start with that understanding in our own system, where we recognize actually nothing here is as dense as it feels, and we can penetrate all of that seeming density with our awareness, be present within it, shift realities, whether those are patterns of disease or patterns of belief, or all we recognize that they're all in effect the same, and there's no order of difficulty. And I think that's what we're coming back to, and water is training us in that, I think.
And we love to use the word flow, right? And we always talk about flowing when we talk about consciousness. Yes, I think it's 70 to 80% water. But one of the things that I've been understanding and realizing is just how little sometimes our science community becomes aware of some things. So I was listening to somebody talk about the actual makeup of our muscles and our fascia, and how our fascia it's really primarily liquid, and every bit of fiber in our muscles is coated with water. So we think of muscle as like this solid thing, but every single tiny thread of every muscle has a shaft of water around it. And massage therapists will know this too, that sometimes when you touch certain parts of the body, memories are either released or sometimes remembered, sometimes re-experienced, sometimes, of course, discovered or brought up when they've been hidden. hidden for a while, but you know, I don't know if you follow Veda's work closely enough, but she actually does this thing, which I just, it's so astonishing to have people on the planet who do things like this. But she's figured out she uses her little petri dishes to make the crystallography images. Do you know sometimes she puts a little dish of water by her bedside and her dreams go into the
Saw that
water.
on Facebook just the other day that
Did
the
you?
dream imprints. But I
Yes,
think it's like so because she's developed such a relationship with that element
exactly.
now,
Yes.
whatever she's even thinking about is going to imprint itself because she's really, and I think,
She's
we
so
have to bear that
connected.
in mind that that's her speciality now. And if somebody else wanted to replicate that, they might have to try, focus on that a little bit, but it is all available to us,
Sure.
and it's useful. This is what I'm learning from Joe Hemmant. It's useful to know what your element of speciality is, whether that be fire or earth or water or ether, or there's going to be probably one major one that your system really resonates with, and it's going to be easier for you to uh, interact and communicate with. So, yeah, that's also an interesting thing. But I think water is on the agenda for everybody now, isn't it?
Mhm.
So yeah, it's fascinating. Me and Joe just did this journey to Scotland, and this is a really small country, this United Kingdom, compared, I think that it would fit into Texas 6 times, the whole of the UK. And so it's small in those terms, but it's still 800 miles from the south coast to the top of the north coast of Scotland. And we drove that and back again over the course of the week. There's a big line of energy that runs from north to south, and we followed that line of energy and we stopped at various places. And I can't say we did much ceremony, but we just sat and meditated and were with the energies. And by the time we got to Scotland, to this north coast, where that, and it's not a line of energy, it's 2 lines of energy, like a masculine polarized stream of energy and a feminine polarized stream of energy. And where those 2 different streams meet and cross over one another, there tends to be a big, a place that has been made significant, a place of worship or ritual or ceremony from our ancestor stone circles, wells, all sorts of sacred sites. And but where the 2 lines cross over are the bigger sacred sites. And by the time we got to the north coast of Scotland, I was feeling really deeply immersed in these streams of energy. And although they don't run down the beach into the sea, they run along the headland, which is a couple of miles long, through the old ruined churchyard, along the headland and into the sea there. But I was wanting to swim, and it was a glorious evening. And the sun wasn't setting because we were in the north of the country. It wasn't setting until about 10:30. So it was amazing. And I was just walking towards the sun into the sea, and it felt like these lines of energy had joined in my body and were propelling me into the sea. It was the most surreal experience. And I also felt that my body had become quite vast, that I had become a solar being, and I was being carried by these streams of and how I experienced it, I was experiencing these streams of energy as liquid flowing through me. So I
Wow.
think at this level, where, like you say, everything is flow, and that's what life is. That's what abundance is. It's flow. It's not having vast amounts that you hold on to. It's recognizing that the universe knows no limits and knows no lack and will continue to flow through you whatever it is we need if we're open to that as a possibility. But our mindsets are, we're still encased and encumbered with a belief in lack for, for the most part of humanity, because again, that's been a strong training on this planet for a long time. And we're starting to break free of it, I think. But yeah, the universe knows no lack. And when we relate to it at that level, then we are part of the endless flow that is life. And it's extraordinary. And I think this week we thought of this as a pilgrimage, this journey to Scotland, and it was, because I think a pilgrimage is a holy journey, and it became that for us. But I think it's a really useful thing to do, to go on a holy journey where you give yourself and your body and your time and your attention to the other realms for a period of time, so that
Uh,
they can take you deep, and that's beautiful. And I think more and more, it's interesting, this line of energy, it's called the Ellen Belinus line, the spine of Albion. Albion is the ancient term for this country. So it runs up the spine of this country. And there's another big line of energy that runs along the southeast coast called the Michael and Mary line, which a lot of people have.
yes, I've been on that one.
So the two of those meet at a point which is a beautiful, beautiful point called Uffington, the town of Uffington, and there's a big white dragon emblazoned across the hill that's been there for thousands of years, probably carved into the chalk. And uh, I think more and more people are becoming aware of these big lines of energy, because they're fundamental to life in itself. They fertilize, and um, they fertilize the land. They keep the land uh, fertile. That's the only word for it, in a sense. And our ancestors knew them and understood them, and would build monuments and create rituals and walk these lines of energy as a way of being in harmony with the planet, of receiving guidance, because these lines and the places where they meet are powerful places to receive guidance and insight and intuition. And it's been my experience that some of the biggest healings I've had have been directly from the earth through these lines of energy. So and that's free. Then you don't have to pay anybody for those.
Right.
It's amazing, and it helps us to remember our connectedness and to fall in love with this planet, with this life. Because often for me, I wasn't in love with life. I wasn't in love with the body. I wasn't in love with being here, and it's taken a long time to really appreciate what this opportunity is, and to really give myself to life. Uh,
Mhm.
so, and the earth, and being in a sense, seduced by the earth, by these journeys. And I've done lots of them now, and they always take
Mhm.
me deeper and are profound and beautiful and remarkable, in very simple ways often.
Right.
Uh, but lovely. So I would recommend, and I think a lot of people are starting to map these lines of energy in various territories and countries. Um, and so I'm sure that's happening in the US as well. So look out for those, because it's great to walk or to be present on these lines of energy and to make a bit of a journey, because the earth really appreciates that too. The line of energy is the streams of consciousness, they will interact with you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's
And your
beautiful.
proximity to them, when you were talking about walking and towards the ocean, and I imagined a lot of people doing that. And isn't it wonderful when the sun is on the water?
Mm.
That sparkle line it's straight to you. It doesn't matter how many of you are going towards the water.
Towards the light, in effect.
Yes, yeah, exactly. You will have your own stream of sparkles coming that way. And so it's only yours. And the person over there has theirs. And nobody has one that's bigger, brighter, You don't have to try to go get on somebody else's, right?
No,
You
no.
have yours because that's your path and your direction. David, are you one of the people who've noticed since you were a kid the change in the color of the sun?
I've read about this, but no, because it always seemed white to me.
Really?
I've never, I mean, as children, we always used to,
Yep.
when you draw a sun, you would
Yeah.
draw it as yellow, but I always thought, well, it's strange because it's always been white.
Isn't that interesting? Yeah, for me it was so yellow. It was
What I've
so
noticed is
yellow.
a change in the color of the sky, in a sense, in that it seems a deeper blue. And a lot of things seem to have changed since childhood. Although as a child, we lived in Wales and crop circles happen in the south of England. But as a child, they used to happen in the fields behind my house. And I always remember asking my father, "What's that? What's that?" And he was saying, "Oh, it's just the wind. It's just a pattern made by the wind." But these were perfect circles that would appear, um, overnight in the fields behind our house. And there was a sloping hill that you could see from the house, and these crop circles would magically appear. And so those sort of things I noticed, and I'm sure that's true in many places. They just sort of go unnoticed or unremarked.
Yeah.
In the south of England with these big, and there are a lot of sacred sites in those areas, so they get more notice.
Thank you
And
for
something else I want to,
look at that.
this stone has always been, not this particular stone, but this type of crystal has
Mhm.
always been my favorite crystal. Its name is aquamarine, so
Yeah.
water of the sea, and it's
Yeah.
always been my favorite stone. And
Uh-huh.
uh, and I never sort of questioned that. And I've got quite a few little pieces. This is the biggest piece. It was a gift from somebody last year.
It looks a lot like the painting behind you.
Well, and those are the colors that are always my
Sure.
favorite colors.
Of course.
um, but this stone, aquamarine, I I don't often use it when I'm doing energy work with somebody, but sometimes it really calls to be used, and I just run energy through the stone into somebody's field, and it's like watching crystal clear aquamarine water washing through somebody's system to cleanse and wash away what is ready to leave, and even some of what isn't quite ready to leave. It's a really profound stone for cleaning and clearing. And I think I've always had this sense that aquamarine, it certainly links us into the Atlantean um, civilization, but I think it's a stone whose time is really now, in a sense. I think
Mhm.
it's a really useful stone for now. So I just wanted to drop that in because this was sitting on the
It
desk shouting.
is. It's yelling at you.
And
Yeah, I
yeah,
can see that. I can see
mention
that.
me, mention me, and its connection to water. It's with that name. It's yeah.
What do you make of the difference between fresh and seawater? Something about the salt dissolved into the ocean seems particularly significant in my mind.
Yeah, and what is amazing is that it's apparently a very similar salinity to the water in our system, isn't it?
Exactly.
Which
Yeah.
is quite extraordinary. I mean, we really, as human development or cellular development, we developed in that sea, and we develop still in a sea, in our mother's womb, in a field of water. And so it's vital, isn't it, for so saline water. I think it just holds a stronger crystalline matrix, in a sense, and
Yeah.
more information. uh,
Yeah.
I notice, and I prefer swimming in in salt water. It's easier to swim in salt water because there's more
You're more
buoyancy.
buoyancy. Yeah.
Totally. And that makes a real difference. If you're swimming fairly long distances, you really notice that, that the sea supports you in a way that a lake doesn't quite. And nothing wrong with swimming in a lake. I swam in Loch Ness last week, which
Did
was,
you?
I really did. It was extraordinary. I'll tell you about that in a minute. Um, but yeah, I think the salt imparts then a stronger crystalline matrix to the water, and so it holds more information, and then it can draw more out of our system. If
Right.
go in with it, I know there are times if my field is full of energy and that energy is integrating and useful for me, I don't want to go into the sea because the sea will wash it away. Sometimes my field is full of energy and I'm very happy to go to the sea and give that energy away. But sometimes it's like, oh, I need to integrate that energy. So don't go to the sea for a couple of days while that energy is integrating. And that's sort of intriguing for me as well, you know.
I want to hear about Loch Ness, but I want to mention this. I wrote this down when you were talking about figuring out which element do you align most to. Of course, no question, no question. Your water.
Well, no, actually, fire is my
Oh,
primary
really?
one. Yeah. Um, and fire, even as a child, I mean, I just love fire, and I always
Well,
knew that fire was an intelligent, living thing. You know, even so, it always fascinated me.
well, you
But
you do talk about sitting around fires in your garden,
yeah,
so
it's so fire is the. But for me, fire, earth, and water are they're almost all equal. The one that I don't particularly or relate less to is air. That's the one that isn't so much on my radar, and I don't have air would be the element of the intellect, and I don't have much of an intellect, you know.
I don't believe that for a moment.
No,
Not
but you know,
even for a
in
moment.
terms of I didn't develop my
I
intellect. I
understand
didn't
what you're
study,
saying. It's
you know,
just, yeah, it's just a label anyway. I don't know
and
about.
I wasn't able to focus intellectually because primarily I was out of my body and not very present. So that protected me, I think, from developing a very strong um, intellectual capacity because I see so many people are damaged by the fact they've had too much intellectual training and they can't break out of the
Yeah,
rigidity.
but look at how you can communicate. I mean, you're a fantastic communicator. You have the streams of information that come to you. I mean, I don't know. How is that not intellectual? I mean, I know what you're saying. I'm pushing back a little on the
What I'm saying is that I'm not
definition.
saying I'm not intelligent. I have
Oh, I know
an
that too.
intelligence, but it just wasn't. I didn't study in school. I didn't study. I didn't get a university degree. You know, so I didn't. I bypassed all of that, and I think there was
Can I
purpose.
just say, lucky you?
Yeah, I think it was how it was meant to be for me. You know, and
A lot of ways.
yeah.
There's things to envy about that. But when you were talking about these elements, do you know? And I wish, of course, I would have had my facts reminded to me so that I could recall them with a little more clarity to be able to mention this. But I had a distant relative once contact me because he recognized the Craw part of my name, my family name, and he had done some genealogy, and he traced our common ancestors all the way back to, gosh, I'm gonna need to figure out where this was, but there is an actual monument, or like a marker, I think is a better term for it. There's a marker outside of a church in Scotland dedicated to a man named John Craw, who was burned at the stake in
Wow.
that place. I believe during the Inquisition, if I have my days and dates right. But that's, when you were talking about moving up north the spine to Scotland, and then the elements and everything, I'm seeing my relative, with his spine, attached to wood and burned up there somewhere in Scotland. So
And it's because I think that the witch trials were quite significant. They're not huge in this country compared to a lot of Europe, but
mhm.
there was just a documentary on television the other night about that. And when I first started doing this work on a larger scale and running teleconferences and stuff, I was in Edinburgh, and this woman was saying that she was going to launch my work. She was going to publicize it. And what did I want to do? Well, the area of Edinburgh we were in was famed for the witch trials. It was there that the witch trials were held. So there were little plaques in various places. This is where the witches were jailed and whatever. And it had always been a really significant part of my history, the witch trials and the inquisitional experience, because when I first started giving readings, one woman after another would walk in with this in her energy field, the scarring of that in her energy field, and it acted as a real sort of inhibition to her opening her psychic abilities. And I understood that this was a collective scar.
Yeah.
It went on for such a long time, over hundreds of years, for a largely uneducated population. So it went in very deep, as a deep fear and superstition. And yeah, many people have had to work really hard, but that was my first teleconference. Was it my first bit of collective energy work? Was the
Interesting.
clearing of the scars of the Inquisition and the witch trials, because it's a powerful thing that many of us still hold the memory of, and
Oh, yeah.
it was designed to have exactly that sort of impact, to separate humanity from its natural capacities to communicate interdimensionally, and to make that a forbidden and frightening area of exploration. And again, luckily, we're coming out of that now, and they are very natural capacities and abilities that we all possess. So, so yeah, if anybody's listening and is being triggered by what I'm saying, go do some exploration around the witch trials and releasing that, with one of your sessions, that they're perfect for just that sort of work, aren't they? Not that you have to experience them
Right.
once. You don't have to go
They were a
back
lot
to the
more
experience.
common before. But they certainly, there's a few that I was just talking to somebody else about this recently, but there's like these archetypal scenes that happen in these sessions over and over again. And of course, and this working with people and energy. So when you see it and you see it and you see it, you realize, yes, it is something that pertains to that individual, but it is this collective thing. And you're so good at making those collective observations. But there are people who are burned at the stake, usually for which is so interesting, usually for providing a service that everyone out there wants anyway, but there's some sort of contract to keep it quiet, right? So over and over again, it's the woman or the man, but typically the woman, living alone in the woods, ostracized, and yet everyone from the group that's part of the ostracization knows that they can, in the under cloak of night, go visit and receive assistance, very often very powerful assistance. And in the end, they're still often so destroyed anyway.
Yeah.
They're pulled out of their enclave and destroyed anyway. That was one. And here's another one. I think this is because it came up in a quantum healing session. This one happens a lot, where people, usually an initial scene in a session, they are standing at the edge of a cliff looking out over the water, over the ocean. And it's usually the wind is blowing and it's usually very high up and it's usually a point of decision making that happens then, and then the story can go from there. But it's so fascinating to see these archetypal things, or they're on journeys looking for lost family or just some other things. There's some common, very powerful themes that run through, and sometimes people can place them and match them to energies in their own history, and sometimes not. And that's when I say, look, this is humanity too. You're part of humanity, not only your ancestral line, not only your relatives, not only your family, not only your own personal life, but all of humanity. That energy runs through you too, more or less depending on the triggers and such.
And I think we're coming back to that now, that we're coming back to the awareness of ourselves as a collective energy field.
Mm-hmm.
When we worked really hard for thousands of years to individuate and to separate out from that. But before, we had a tribal mind and we worked for the tribe. We weren't separate, and our life depended on fitting into the tribe and being, and everybody would have had their role and be held by the field of the tribe. That's never changed, but we have lost contact with that. And I've always been aware the work I do is collective, is primarily collective, and I'm working with those big archetypal energies that are shifting. And I've always understood since I started doing this work that we don't realize how collective we actually are. We think we're just a bunch of individuals, but actually we're governed much, much more by the collective fields and collective consciousness than we realize. And we're coming back to that now, that there is one body of humanity, one body of Christ, if you like. The Christ light is one. It's not separate. It's not individuated. It has many facets through which it shines, but it is one body. And for many of us, we're a bit frightened about that idea of oneness because we think we'll lose our individuality when we merge back in. But the truth is we've never left, and we won't lose our individuality. We simply open up to the deeper resonance and the deeper connectedness of oneness, as well as having all of our individuality too. And it's that's the process we're in. I think that's the ascension process, in a sense,
It is. What did you want to say about Loch Ness?
Me and Joe were driving past Loch Ness, and I knew I wanted to swim in Loch Ness, even though it's the deepest lake in Britain. It's cold. The water is very cold all year round. But I thought, well, that's not going to be a problem because I swim in the sea all year round here anyway. So I'm used to cold water. And the water is dark because the water flowing into the loch flows through peat. So it's stained the color of tea. So if you scoop some out in your hands, it's a brown. It's clear, but it's brown. It's clean, but it's colored brown simply because of the peat that it flows through. And we stopped in a lay-by by the side of the lake, but there was a very steep slope down to the loch, and loch means lake. That's what it means. And I went down and immediately slipped and put my hand down to stop myself slipping on this very steep little cliff, and grabbed a bramble and cut myself on this bramble, only a little cut. But as that happened, I was aware that the reason I had lost my footing was because I was entering another dimensional space, and I hadn't asked permission. I hadn't acknowledged that or anything. And so I lost my footing. And as I realized that, I came to a stop. And
a great phrase for this that you're getting ready to say, right? You lost your, I mean, because it's a symbolic phrase.
Yeah, totally. And there was a little bit of blood on my finger where I had cut it, and I put the blood on the bark of the tree. I just wiped my finger. And as I did that, and this really surprised me, all of those, there was like a dimensional wall in a sense. And that whole wall just opened. And I realized that that had been an ancient offering
Sure.
that had been made. And it's not necessary. A blood offering is not a necessary thing, but it often was in our history, I think, used as a way of gaining access. And as I gave just a tiny drop of blood to the tree, that all of the dimensional divides opened, and I was really shocked by that experience. Anyway, I didn't want to swim in that location because it was too steep and too difficult to get. So we drove on a bit and found a much easier place to get to the water's edge. And I went in, but I was quite, because I don't like deep, dark water particularly. It's not my thing.
Yeah.
And we know there are monsters in that water. There are big, but as I was swimming, I went in and I was swimming, and I suddenly became aware of the Loch Ness monster as
Of
a water
course. How
dragon.
could you not? How
Well,
could
it's a
you?
water dragon.
Of
It's just a
course.
water dragon. And I think because I think the loch is like a portal,
Sure.
a really powerful place. And I had moved through those dimensions. I think sometimes people do that and get a glimpse of the water dragon. I think it gets termed the Loch Ness monster, but it's actually just another multi-dimensional being. And the lovely thing was, on the other side of the loch from where we were, there was a shape on the side of the cliff on the other side, which was a beautiful curve. And from our angle, it looked like the head of a dragon. So it was right there in front of us, and it was sort of perfect. But it was a lovely. I wasn't in the water for long because it was really quite cold, but it felt special to me in a way that I can't really put into words. But it was um, moving into another dimensional space, I think, and that felt quite profound. And I felt both, and I only went into the water twice, once in the sea at the top of the north coast of Scotland, and once in Loch Ness, and both felt really profound and powerful moments. And I swim a lot, but they both felt very different and very important in terms of the journey we were on. So that was my Loch Ness experience.
That's just fantastic. Thank you for sharing all that. I'm so intrigued by your blood touch to the tree.
Yeah, I was surprised at that. It took me completely by surprise, really.
As soon as you did that, I had a whole lot of mirror into mirror into mirror tree things happen throughout my field. And one part I'll mention about that was just this idea I had in just an intuitive consult. It wasn't even in a quantum healing session. It was just in a conversation with somebody about trees. I just following my intuition when we were talking about something completely different, and that this tree just kept coming back into my mind, and I'm like, okay, well, I guess I'm supposed to and so I just, like, in the middle of the conversation where we're having, I'm like, do you have a favorite tree? And her face lit up, and she said yes. As a matter of fact, I was sitting against it meditating before my session with you today. That's when the real conversation launched. And what ended up being so fascinating about that conversation, that was just sort of redeposited in my mind when you did that, was the communication that the trees have with tree systems, but not just earth tree systems, but with tree systems across worlds, like in other physical worlds. Groves of trees here have like these ancient antenna sending and receiving kind of, it's almost like, we know about the mycelium complex with the fungus and how they can do that, but trees can do that uh, not only through their roots with their families, but through their crowns
Yeah, yeah,
into other realms and other worlds. And
yeah.
something about you touching that tree has like sparked something really interesting in me where I feel my own tree is calling me right now. That's beautiful.
And but what is really apparent to me is that our nervous system is branched like a tree. And when
Yes.
I'm leading a group into a meditation or an individual, I always do this thing of connecting into the nervous system, but also allowing the nervous system to expand out through the field, because I know we do exactly the same. We connect across worlds and dimensions and universes out to all of the information that we actually need, whatever it is that's available to us. And we are like those trees. And I had a lovely experience. I am aware that I have a client fairly soon,
Oh,
so
I
I
know. I've got people upstairs too. I love talking to you. We'll wrap it up with whatever it is you're going to share now.
another part of that journey, which was totally unplanned. We pulled into a lay-by. No, we pulled into our Airbnb. We just crossed over the English Scottish border, so we were back in England, making our way back down the line. Pulled into our Airbnb, which was the annex of a pub, a little cottage next to the pub, and we were staying there for a night. And as we pulled into the car park, there was a sign for Flodden Field battleground 1 mile away, and we didn't know this at all. But as soon as we saw the sign, we knew we were being called to that place, and so we went the next day, and it was extraordinary. I was invited, and this had happened to me once before, in the very famous battleground close to here, which is the Battle of Hastings, which changed everything for this country 1,000 years ago. This battlefield, Flodden Field, was a battleground in 1513 between the Scots and the English. Bloody, brutal battle, the biggest of the battles. And I was asked to do the same there that I was asked here on this battlefield when I got there, was to walk the perimeter of the field. And there were huge, Joe was asked to do something else. And of course, we were working in tandem without needing to be in the same place. But there were huge upwellings of emotion, and all sorts of things happened. One of the loveliest things was that as I started to walk the perimeter, all of the trees that grow in that area followed me. So I was, and all of the nature spirits, it felt like. So I was leading a procession of tree beings and nature spirits who were all really, really delighted and very happy. It was like a carnival, like a celebration behind me, because they were all so happy to be that this clearing was happening. And as I say, it wasn't anything Joe and I had planned. We didn't even know we were close to the battlefield, but it turns out that some of her ancestors were in that battle. And it was a definite clearing and a very profound experience. But the tree beings were very much a part of that process. That's what I wanted to say.
Oh, fantastic. Look at all the
Yeah,
points of connection.
yeah, yeah.
Well, I'm
And
going to have
also
to
because they
meet
were
this Joe pretty soon.
she would be superb for you to connect with and chat to, because she's her energy work is extraordinary. She's an amazing psychic and energy worker, um, and a very gifted well, a very gifted human being. And for me, it's a real pleasure to have made this contact, because as soon as we saw each other, as soon as we met, we knew we had known each other for lifetimes, and we very quickly knew that we were meant to work together. And I've been doing this work for quite a number of years now, but I had in the past few months started to feel like it was a real slog. And it was like, oh, this really feels like hard work. And it's like I was starting to look around thinking, what can I do? And feeling that I needed some support. And then Joe and I meet and we understand that we are meant to work together. And it's like,
Isn't that
and
nice?
so it changes everything.
Sure.
And I'm very totally aware that the field we create together is much bigger than the sum of its parts, and it's the same as two lines of energy meeting, a masculine and feminine, and in those places it's the same sort of thing, and that there is something particular about a masculine body and a female body working together. That polarity allows for something else to happen. And I'm sort of surprised at that in a sense. I don't know why, but I thought my role in this lifetime was to make that union internally with myself, the masculine and feminine principles. And I think it is. I think enough of that has been done internally here to allow for the connection externally to happen. And this isn't an intimate sexual relationship. Joe is happily married. I'm a gay man, so that's not what it's going to be. But it's very intimate in the sense of its energetic, its deep energetic connectedness. So it can happen in all sorts of ways, and took us both by surprise, But it's powerful and profound.
It's just so amazing. Some of the most powerful spiritual couples I know working together are male and female, whether they're in a relationship or not. Many of them are. Easily, I can see how,
Yeah.
and why.
Yeah. And I'm starting to understand that too now, although I've never looked for that at all. I thought it was going to be me doing this as a solo act the whole time. But
and sometimes it's just easier, isn't it? I mean, look, you and I've been talking together now for coming close to an hour and a half. I know you got to go. I got to go too. It's easier than just looking at a camera and talking all on your own, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's a heck of a lot easier playing off the energies of
somebody else. It totally is. You need it. And we're pack animals, to be honest.
Yes.
We like, our bodies like the company of other bodies. And that's a cellular thing that, and sometimes emotionally we built up emotional walls that would tell us otherwise. But at this fundamental physical level, our bodies appreciate company. And so do our hearts, and that's that.
David, we've spent so much time together. I would have, but I'm not going to, because I'm going to hold this idea hostage so that you'll come back and talk to me again. Before this year completes, I mean, we've got to get together and talk about, because I mean, it just, something's around the corner, something is bubbling, something is. All right, so I guess we're done. So thanks again to David Manning. You could find David's link below in the description in the show notes, David Manning Energy Work. And if you're a quantum healer of any kind and would like to join our community at quantumhealers.com, please consider that. We are a guru-free community of all kinds of energy healers, service to others, practitioners, and light workers. Come check us out, quantumhealers.com. If you're looking for a practitioner, you can find our directory listings there as well. All right, till next time. Bye, everyone.